Welcome back here in the studio where we are we are continuing this third day of the third edition. Let me point to two sessions that are starting now and which are particularly of particular interest. Perhaps I'll mention one and then give you the floor, Trisha, and then mention the second. On the main stage, we will have a highlight of this edition with a reflection around how do we make our productive system, how do we make capitalism more green and more fair, greener and fairer, changing and reforming capitalism. And that will feature, among others, French Minister of the Economy, Bruno Le Maire, and Nobel Prize Mohamed Yunus, who will be talking with other speakers on that stage. Trisha.
I want to kind of explain the reasoning and the logic as to how do we decide what are the topics we will be speaking about during the 3 days of the forum. And I think it will be of particular interest to the attendees that we actually don't decide these topics till we choose the 100 projects that are going to be showcased at the forum. So unlike what you may see in a lot of other forums where they decide topics of conversation beforehand and then invite speakers, we actually wait to get the projects, to select the 100 projects that we will be showcasing at the forum, because we truly believe that those will then help us dictate what are the key points of conversation we need to have and govern the conversation flow. So once we have those, we then discuss, okay, these are the high talking points. So for example, we have been focusing a lot on drug policy reform and the kind of implications it has towards COVID recovery, as well as looking at prison reform, looking at access to healthcare, as well as uplifting the most vulnerable and marginalized communities' concerns. So maybe you also want to give us a little bit about, of course, this year we're focusing a lot more on COVID. But what are the other topics that Paris Peace Forum has been championing from year one that have almost become like the veins of Paris Peace Forum, its identity in terms of championing subjects?
It's true. We've had these sort of transversal channels, I would say. AI is one, artificial intelligence. Throughout the 3 years of the Paris Peace Forum, we've had not only sessions on thinking about the ethics and the regulation of AI, because we know it's a promise of wonderful things for public administration, for our daily lives. We also know that it's a threat to democracy, to the way we do things, etc. And so we've had sessions on the ethics of AI just this morning again. But we also have many projects among the hundreds of 2018, 2019, and 2020 that have used AI. And so it's sort of a transversal theme. For example, AI and nature conservation. There's a really interesting project on that this year, but there was also one last year. There was also the attempt to pool AI together to have sort of data commons last year. We had AI and better public administration, etc. So there are many of these themes that you would find that are transversal to the forum.
And I guess, we do talk about how Paris Peace Forum is a place where we get heads of states to come and talk with civil society, philanthropic organizations. But a particular country that has been missing in the conversations with Paris Peace Forum over the 3 years has been the United States of America, the administration. So how have we sort of filled the vacuum of having the administration's presence not be here, but yet echo the concerns within America, but also how America plays a role in geopolitics as a whole at Paris Peace Forum?
It's true. What happened was that the Americans filled the vacuum by themselves, in a sense. That is to say, we've had so much energy coming from American NGOs, from American civil society, think tanks, philanthropic foundations, and many of them are our partners, many of the top philanthropic foundations, the same ones working on climate, working on social equality, working on biodiversity, working on health and the pandemic have been our partners. And also, I would add, sort of an official presence of mayors and states. And that has been sort of filling the void that the Trump administration has created.
Okay. So as you can see, we're serious about achieving peace, looking at global governance, and a quick word that you want to leave the audience with as to what they should be occupying their afternoon doing today at the forum?
Yes, so the afternoon will be important. Let me just make one announcement, one more announcement for the session that will be starting in just a few minutes. I mentioned the session on the main stage with Minister Bruno Le Maire and Mohamed Yunus and others. I will mention one other, should you be interested. You know, we are asking what should the post-COVID-19 world look like? And everybody seems to converge on the idea that it should be greener than the world we are leaving behind. And so the question that we'll ask in that panel on stage B, from crisis to clean, accelerating the transition to clean energy in the wake of the pandemic, we'll put that question to a major oil company, which is Total. So we'll have Patrick Pouyanné, the CEO of Total. It's a typical Paris Peace Forum panel. We have a company, we have an international organization, the International Energy Agency, which is a partner of the forum, with his boss, Fatih Birol. And we'll also have a foundation, in this case, the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation, which has completely divested from fossil fuels in this case. So it will make for a really interesting discussion, but also a discussion oriented towards what are we doing to wean off CO2 emissions.
Okay, perfect. Well, be sure to follow the conversations with us.
Bonjour et bienvenue à la séance de Paris Peace Forum. Cette séance a un thème de plus de guerre et plus de juste. Remettre en question et réformer le capitalisme. Sur UK à Paris, c'est un journal économique à Paris. Et je suis le modérateur de cette séance. D'abord, je vais vous présenter aux spectateurs nos quatre invités distingués qui sont très impliqués à ce sujet. Monsieur Bruno Le Maire, ministre français de l'économie, des finances et de la relance. Depuis la pandémie de Covid-19, c'est lui et son ministère qui ont mené des mesures importantes pour l'économie française. Madame Marie Pangestu, femme politique indonésienne et directrice générale de la Banque mondiale pour les politiques et développement et les partenariats. Avant, elle était la ministre du commerce de l'Indonésie. Et Monsieur Yohamed Yunus, économiste et entrepreneur bangladais, fondateur de la banque Green Bank, où il a développé l'idée du microcrédit pour répondre aux défis de la pauvreté. Il a reçu le prix Nobel de la paix en 2006. Monsieur James Mwangi, directeur général de l'entreprise IAN du service financier Equity Group Holding, connu pour son engagement pour la finance inclusive. Il est très impliqué au développement durable et à l'aide aux entreprises entrepreneurs en Afrique. On discute de la question du capitalisme dans cette séance. Le débat existait depuis toujours, mais avec la pandémie, beaucoup d'entre nous, y compris moi, ont le sentiment que le capitalisme actuel doit se réformer. D'abord, l'écart entre les riches et les pauvres. La pandémie a rendu cet écart plus grave qu'avant. Il y a la même pandémie, mais il y a des travailleurs, par exemple, avec des contrats de travail plus précaires et donc plus touchés par cette pandémie. Il y a aussi une question de la durabilité de l'économie. Ce n'est pas 100% lié au Covid, mais de plus en plus, beaucoup du monde, si notre business model d'entreprise est durable ou pas. C'est une séance qui dure à peu près 1 heure, donc jusqu'à à peu près 18h, 11h45, 55. Et après des échanges, avec les panélistes, j'aimerais consacrer après 10 minutes ou 15 minutes aux questions et réponses. Pour les spectateurs qui regardent cette séance en ce moment, peuvent poser des questions directement grâce au chat box de la plateforme de Paris Peace Forum. Voilà. Ma première question s'adresse au monsieur le maire. Donc, avec la pandémie, on a le sentiment que le rôle de l'État doit évoluer. Comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, il y a l'écart plus grand avec les riches et les pauvres, et par conséquent, le rôle de l'État doit évoluer. À votre avis, comment l'État doit réagir face à cette pandémie? Et pourquoi chaque État doit créer des économies plus vertes, monsieur le maire? Ah bon, je viens d'apprendre que monsieur le maire a du retard. Donc, je vais poser à une autre question. Madame Pangestu, j'ai une question à vous, à Madame Pangestu. Vous m'entendez bien? Alors, je ne vous entends pas. Le son est coupé peut-être?
Maybe you can.
Je n'entends pas
I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
Vous m'entendez, madame?
Yes. Are you asking me a question?
Alors, je n'entends pas la voix de Madame Pangestu. Madame Pangestu, vous m'entendez?
I can, but I can hear him, but he's speaking French and I don't know what he's saying. Well, they told me it was going to be automatically translated. And I don't know which one is the translation.
Also having the same challenge.
They told us that the translation was going to be automatic. And I can't see any function.
Bon, maintenant vous m'entendez?
I can hear him, but he's speaking French.
It's better if I speak in English. Ouais, donc je pose la question quand même. Pour réformer l'économie, le capitalisme,
okay, is somebody going to
on a
translate?
besoin de la coordination internationale. On a besoin des organisations internationales. À votre avis, les organisations internationales doivent évoluer comment? Je ne sais pas si elle a entendu ma voix.
I didn't hear the question. Can you hear
on
me?
a une pause de 10 minutes. Apparemment, on a un problème technique. On aura une pause de 10 minutes.
baisser quand on va faire le test, ne vous inquiétez pas.
Est-ce que le modérateur peut parler?
Bonjour Togo, est-ce que vous pouvez parler dans votre micro? On va essayer de vérifier que tout le monde entende bien la traduction et comme ça après on pourra repartir. Donc parlez et simplement faites votre introduction. Personne n'entend dans le grand public, on vérifie juste que la traduction est claire.
Bonjour à tout le monde. C'est une séance de Paris Peace Forum. Le thème s'appelle le verbe juste. À Paris, journal économique, je connais. Je suis le modérateur de cette séance. Je vais présenter nos 4 invités distingués pour parler de cette séance. Monsieur Bruno Le Maire, ministre français de l'économie, des finances et de la relance depuis la pandémie. C'est lui et son ministère qui ont mené des mesures importantes pour soutenir l'économie française. Madame Marie Pangestu, femme politique indonésienne et directrice générale de la Banque mondiale pour les politiques de développement et les partenariats. Elle était avant la ministre du Commerce de l'Indonésie. Monsieur Mohamed Yunus, économiste et entrepreneur bangladais, fondateur de la banque Grameen Bank, il a développé l'idée du microcrédit pour répondre aux défis de la pauvreté. Il a reçu le prix Nobel de la paix en 2006. Monsieur James Mwangi, directeur général de l'entreprise kenyane de services financiers Equity Group Holdings, pour son engagement pour la finance inclusive. Je ne sais pas si c'est suffisant. Euh, on a bien réglé le problème. Rebonjour à tout le monde. Monsieur le maire, bonjour. Bon, je vais reposer la question à Madame Pangestu. Donc, j'ai dit que avec la COVID-19, pour réformer le capitalisme, on a besoin de la coordination internationale et on a besoin d'organisations internationales aussi. À votre avis, quel est le rôle de, par exemple, la Banque mondiale, et quel est le rôle des organisations internationales pour réformer le capitalisme?
Thank you for your question. Good morning, everybody, or I guess good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I think let's just start with what we're trying to address here, which is I think what the pandemic I think has exposed many issues. The pandemic impacted health, livelihoods, and economies, and it also exposed the underinvestment in sustainable development and highlighting who is vulnerable and why. And we will be seeing a lot of rise in inequality unless we address these issues. And I think you can see that those worst affected by the pandemic are those who have multiple deprivations. Poverty combined with service, lack of adequate services such as water, food, housing, and so on. And the impact has been worse on those with unskilled workers, women, and so on. So I think this is really the crux of the matter in terms of building back greener and fairer economies and societies. And financial institutions like the World Bank can play a critical role in shaping a greener and fairer and more prosperous future. I think the way we are trying to do this is by supporting countries to undertake the structural transformations that will help people and communities with their immediate needs, as well as prepare for future shocks. So a lot of what we do is looking at how we can put people, communities, and sustainable development at the center of our immediate relief as well as recovery and restructuring efforts. Let me just give you a few examples just to make that point. First of all, how do you make greener outcomes? The first thing we try to do is work with governments as they're planning their budgets or their spending. How do you make sure that you are looking not just at physical capital, but also at natural capital? And that is a lot of that is about how they spend their budget and recognizing that spending and investing on green infrastructure projects gives you a triple win. It gives you growth, it gives you jobs, and it also gives you the environmental benefits. So, for instance, government stimulus programs that lead to greener outcomes will benefit people, communities, and the environment. You can take an example like, let's support restoration of degraded forest lands or seascapes. That creates jobs in the restoration work, helps livelihoods of farmers and fishermen and then further down the road, they will have a better source of the land or the seas to have a better livelihoods and better productivity, and that will also help food security as well as the environment. I'm just giving you examples. Rebuilding, getting people to have access to electricity. We talk a lot about connectivity and digitalization, but a lot of the world still doesn't even have electricity. So how do we get electricity access? And that's going to be important to be able to do it in, say, a decentralized way with solar, and that will give access to households. And I think the other example I would give is related to how we can undertake reforms. Governments can take reforms in subsidies that are distorting and also lead to CO2 emission that does not reduce CO2 emission, such as fossil fuel subsidies and agriculture subsidies in fertilizer and so on. And you can repurpose that funds to do other things with helping people. So the final thing I would say is the people part. How do we how can we help governments in their relief effort as well as recovery effort to focus on the people and how these inequalities are being sharpened with the crisis. And this is a lot of that has to do with the social protection programs and the social assistance programs that are being rolled out. And how can we design them, first of all, to have the emergency relief, but in the medium term, you want to be able to use that to also undertake other social assistance programs that will make them be more inclusive or included in the economy. You can take microfinance programs and how the ability for us to have this social assistance program, especially for informal sector. This is what we're finding, that the standard social assistance program that targets the extreme poor just does not help the situation today, because a lot of the impact is so widespread and that it's impacting the near poor, the informal households, that what is needed is a better system of knowing who they are, whether it's the data or whether it's digital
Welcome
ID.
back here in the studio. We've had a couple of technical glitches, for example, in the main stage about 15, 20 minutes ago. Fortunately, that affected only one stage, and now the session is on.
Okay, I'm not sure what that was, but I guess it's saying that I should finish. So let me just finish that. I think what is happening with our experience right now as we roll out social assistance programs in many countries, that we need to do a better job of identifying who needs the assistance and how and what they need. And this is going to be something that hopefully will help governments after the emergency relief stage to be able to identify better whether it's food that they need, whether it's income support, whether it's jobs, or whether it's finance, microfinance, to keep to keep their micro enterprises liquid, and have a distinction also between women, youth, and the skills that they need, and so on. So let me close because I think probably the time is already up. Thank you.
Merci Madame Panguessieu pour votre point de vue très intéressant. Oui, c'est absolument nécessaire d'identifier qui a besoin d'aide dans le monde, dans chaque pays. Et maintenant, la question suivante, c'est pour Monsieur Le Maire. Et, donc, j'ai dit tout à l'heure qu'il y a l'écart plus grave entre les riches et les pauvres dans le monde. Quelle est d'abord votre analyse du problème du capitalisme dans le monde actuel et que proposez-vous pour réformer justement l'État, le rôle de l'État?
Well, once again, thank you for taking part to this roundtable, and I really want to warmly thank Marie Panguessieu, my friend Mohamed Yunus, James Mwangi, and also the moderator Togo Shiraishi for their participation. I really think that we owe to capitalism almost 2 centuries of growth and prosperity. It has brought us more jobs, more innovations, and it has helped us to reduce poverty worldwide. And I really think that this is the positive outcome of capitalism over the last 2 or 3 centuries. However, today's challenges are totally new. Inequalities within countries are increasing, and important people like Mohamed Yunus, important institutions like the IMF or the OECD have been underlining the importance of fighting against inequalities, which are now at the core of our political and economic difficulties worldwide. The second point is that natural resources are running out. Climate change is accelerating, and we should do our utmost efforts to fight against this climate change. Let's face it as it stands. So far, we have been unable to find global answers to these 2 questions, the rise of inequalities and the climate change. It means that capitalism, as we know, has reached its limits. The pandemic is not a revelator of capitalism limits. Its limits have been visible long before the pandemic. And I have been calling with President Macron for a renewed capitalism for more than 3 years. The alternative we have now is quite clear. Either we reinvent capitalism or it will eventually be replaced. I don't think it should be replaced because I don't think we have now a model available that could be as efficient and as long-standing as capitalism. But we need a capitalism which looks for not only short-term profits and that takes into account growing inequalities and this key question of climate change. We don't need a new economic paradigm. We need a new capitalism able to solve today's challenges. So what should this new capitalism be? I would like to propose three steps that seems to me to be absolutely necessary if we want to change capitalism. First, capitalism should be sustainable. Citizens want a carbon-free economy. They want an economy that can find technological solutions to fight against global warming. They want a capitalism that does not deplete the resources of the planet. And I believe we have all the levels to create this sustainable economy. Renewable energies, energy storage technologies, green finance, recovery plans, which aim not only to boost investments, but also to answer today's challenges. Second, we need a new capitalism that reduces inequalities. Let me mention just two kinds of inequalities that we must address. First of all, excessive wage inequality, and the second one, gender inequalities. These inequalities are still far too important, and they should not be persisting today. The third step of this reinvention of the capitalism is a capitalism that should be fairer and more efficient. The key to develop a fairer and more efficient capitalism is building a fairer international tax system. And you know how much I've been personally involved with the French government and with President Macron for the fight to have an international tax system that should be based on two pillars, digital taxation and minimum taxation, so that we can have an international taxation system that would be far more efficient than the one we have inherited from the 20th century. So these are the three steps we are proposing to change capitalism, and I hope that we'll be able to convince large parts of the world nations so that we can move on that direction.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le maire. Maintenant, je vais poser une autre question suivante à Monsieur Nuss. Bonjour, Monsieur Nuss. C'est sur la question de business model d'entreprise. Vous avez parlé dans beaucoup d'interviews que le business model actuel de maximiser le profit n'était pas durable. Au moins, il y a des problèmes. Et pour réformer le capitalisme, pour que ça soit bien pour tout le monde, que proposez-vous pour réformer le capitalisme et notamment pour réformer le business model d'entreprise?
Thank you for the question. I'll just take advantage of the COVID pandemic situation, because all the questions now is on the table, because pandemic has made us think about all this in a very different angle. This has made it very clear what the capitalism has done all these years, and the pandemic has given us opportunity to reflect and see where we are, particularly when we see enormous amount of urgency in a hurry expressed by governments and institutions to make sure that the world goes back to pre-pandemic situation of the economy. So this is an enormous urge to get back there. And I feel very puzzled. Why do we want to go back to pre-pandemic situation? And I keep reminding myself and reminding anybody who would like to hear about it, that I don't want to go back to that world. That world is a terrible world. That world is threatened everything by several things. First of all, global warming. And this is the net result which created all the couple of centuries of capitalism. End result is we are about to be finished, because it shares global warming tells us we have very limited time left. Maybe a couple of decades, maybe 3 decades before we get to the 2.5 degrees Celsius. Scientists tell us after that it's not possible for us to exist in this planet. So going back means we go back to the train, which are heading towards that last station where we'll be all extinct, we don't exist anymore. I said, I don't want to get into that train. The train has stopped now. I want to get out of the train and move in a different direction rather than the destiny that is waiting for us. That's not the destiny that we are looking for. I said the capitalism that we have, in a way, made us the most endangered species on this planet. We don't know how far we're going to exist because of the global warming is one thing. Another thing, again, Mr. Lamarck had mentioned about the wealth concentration. All the wealth of the world is concentrated in a few hands. If you kind of give an extreme example, say 1% of the world population holding 99% of the wealth of the entire world. So to say that another way, that 99% of the population is having access to only 1% of the wealth. And it's getting worse. That's the worst part of it. It's not only happened that way, but it's also getting worse. I said, this is a ticking time bomb. No society, no global society can exist in a situation where all the wealth is sucked up and goes up in the top for the few people. And that society has to collapse very soon. So the capitalism has brought us there. This is not a contribution that has been done. And you mentioned about the corporates, about the profit maximization. That's what the main factor. Capitalism came up with the solution of an entire economy as a profit maximization, because they defined human being as someone who is driven by self-interest. That's what the essence of capitalism is all about. If human beings are driven by self-interest. I said that's the very start is wrong. Human beings are not a selfish being. It's 100% selfish being that floats around on the planet. Human beings are a mixture of interest. It is driven by self-interest, yes, partially, but it's also driven by collective interest, common interest. And we are interested in solving problems, not for self-interest, but a collective interest, because I'm part of that collective. That's the collective interest what we want to have. But economists never brought that into the picture. So they had only one kind of business, self-interest driven business. So that's why the profit maximization became the core of that business. So I'm saying when we accept that collective interest is also part of human being, then we need to create a different kind of business. Business to address the collective problems, to solve collective problems, not to make money, but to solve the problem. So here you have a business where you don't want to make money, and we call them social business, non-dividend company designed and operated for solving people's problems. So if you address that, if you bring it in, then you have a different kind of world. You have a world where some people or people partially doing the self-interest driven businesses and partially also doing the collective interest driven businesses. So that's the kind of direction we have to take. If you remain exclusively on profit maximization business, the world will come to this. We cannot get out of this global concentration, ugly concentration of capital wealth in that. And the third point is destroying, this is the contribution of the capitalism, is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence by design is telling us that machines can do better work than human beings. And with that logic, you'll soon see people are being replaced in an enormous way from every workplace, no matter what workplace you are in, whether you are in a government, whether you're in a private sector, whether you're in a factory, whether you're in an office, whether you're in institutions, everybody will be replaced by artificial intelligence, whether you're a doctor, whether you're an engineer, doesn't matter. And there are projections floating around that they say that in the next 15 years, nearly 500 million people will be out of jobs because of the replacement of the human being with machines. So within few years, we'll see all human beings will be out of business, out of work. They have no work to do. So what kind of world would that be where all human beings have nothing to do in that? Is this the kind of world that we are really looking forward to? I said, no, not me. I don't want to be in a world where I'm useless. I have nothing to do. And I'm just a kind of floating around like a pest in this planet. I don't want to be a pest on this planet. I want to be someone contributing to this planet. So there are three things which brought us into that situation, and we don't want to go back to that situation. So we take this advantage of this pandemic situation, stopping the machine. As I stop the machine, we want to go to a new, different direction. And that different direction I define by saying this will be just the opposite of what we have right now. So that you have to, if you want to bring the capitalism into the picture, it has to be the reverse of the capitalism, not the capitalism as it is, because capitalism has brought us here. So if you put it in the reverse gear, then we go to the opposite. How that reverse gear, we can talk about it. One is that will be world of zero net carbon emission. So we must ensure that we get to the world as quickly as we can before we get extinct, because we have only limited time left. As I said, we're endangered species. And this is not only we're endangered species, it is human being has proven themselves through capitalism that we are self-destructive species on this planet. So that element of self-destruction has to get out. So we have to see that how we preserve ourselves, not for self-interest, for a collective interest. We want to contribute to this planet. So zero net carbon emission. And the second zero is zero wealth concentration. We have to create a world where wealth is shared by everybody, not concentrated by few people in a very ugly way, 99% of the world. That's one element that we have to come out. All the institutions we build, particularly financial institutions we build, these are the vehicles to make this wealth concentration possible, facilitate this wealth concentration. We have to redesign all those institutions, banking institutions, business institutions, and all this, so that wealth, instead of going up, it gets shared by everybody else. Third one, we have to get rid of the, again, this is a contribution of the capitalism to bring artificial intelligence to make a cost of production go lower so that your bottom line gets better. We have to get out of that. We have to create a world which is free from artificial intelligence so that human being can remain in control of this planet and serve the planet in the best way possible. So this is the kind of natural direction that we have to have. I mentioned about the two kinds of businesses. Another one is capitalism has told us that everybody has to have a job. And again, I feel very funny that why human beings have to have a job. Because in our entire history, we never had a job. We are hunters, we are gatherers, we are farmers. That's where we are. But for 2 centuries, suddenly we are told that we have to get jobs. We have to serve somebody else. I said, human beings are not born to work for somebody else. That is the spirit of human being. Human being is an independent being. It's a creative being. The essence of human being is the creativity. If you put a human being into a job, first thing you do, you cut off the creativity. Job doesn't need creativity. Job is a submission. Job is something you do under order. Whether you like it or not, you have to do the best possible way you can do. Even you hate that what you do. That's a job. So that's not the kind of thing that we need. But this is what we do through our education system, telling that you have a good job, good education, get a good degree so that you have a good job. We never say that human beings are born as entrepreneurs, as a free person. So we have to design the economy for the free person. So that we were to tell our young people that you are born as an entrepreneur. But if you want to take a job, these are the opportunities you have. But remember, you are basically born as an entrepreneur, and your job is to bring creativity and change the world the way you want. So there'll be two kind of prong education system that you can choose your path, whether you want to be a job seeker or you want to be an entrepreneur. And microcredit, microfinance that been mentioned here is a way to show how everybody can become entrepreneur. The millions of women in the rural areas today, that's what the microfinance is all about. Take tiny little money from microfinance institution and turn themselves into entrepreneurs. If illiterate women in rural areas who never left their village in their lifetime can convert themselves into entrepreneur and change their life, there's no reason why anybody cannot be an entrepreneur. So this is the essence of the whole thing. We want to go back to that. So we have to rediscover ourselves, redesign everything that we did. We have to think differently. If we follow the same old path, we'll go to the same old destruction, path of destruction that we're heading for. If you want to go to a new direction, create a new world, we have to build new roads. That's the challenge of the day. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Younes. C'est un message très fort quand on dit qu'il faut faire taire l'inversement. Et maintenant, Monsieur Mouangui, merci pour votre patience. Alors, donc, le Covid a révélé le problème du capitalisme de façon différente dans chaque continent. À votre avis, en Afrique, le problème du capitalisme a été révélé comment? Et que proposez-vous pour réformer le problème?
Thank you very much. I think we have observed the challenges that COVID have exposed regarding the capitalism as practiced today. And the first one is, of course, inequality. We have seen the poorer in Africa has become more poorer. Capitalism has not distributed opportunities well. That is the bottom line of that greater inequality. The second thing is exclusion. We have seen a lot of people excluded, particularly the digital era. We're realizing that digital education has come in to fill the gaps with the closure of schools. But the majority of the population can't access digital learning. And again, that has really intensified exclusion. We have seen disruption of supply chains. And the disruption of supply chains has meant really, again, lack of access of fair distribution. And we have seen inequality being brought into being and into the visibility of everybody. I think the worst part that has been exposed is disruption on the economic engine, where the enterprises are driving the economy. And we have seen mass unemployment. And with that mass unemployment, we have seen almost human catastrophe in terms of human suffering. People have lost jobs, people have lost livelihoods, and they're left to hunger, disease, and all that we can talk about. All these are visible signs of a capitalism that is not working. The worst part of that has exposed of capitalism is that it has not been responsive. It has witnessed the challenges that has been brought to fore, but capitalism seems not to be responsive and in a timely manner. So a lot of people have been left to suffer. Capitalism has not addressed the challenges. As we had said, what capitalism now appears is it has no face and it has no soul. It has left everybody who has been displaced to continue suffering. And I think the weakness of selfishness of capitalism has been exposed in the sense that we have plenty among us, but that plenty is not fairly distributed. There are some who has everything, and there are others with nothing, and they are coexisting in the same space. And lastly, the evil of resource allocation by capitalism has been exposed. Natural resources, and Africa is gifted very much with natural resources, have been extracted and utilized by capitalism, but not for society. And we have seen particularly capitalism abandoning communities in which it operates at their hour of need. When suffering brought about by COVID came in, capitalism, and particularly the enterprise and the corporations, have not responded adequately to the suffering of humanity. So that gap between community and society owns resources because they are natural resources, but the benefits of those resources are not fairly distributed. And lastly, what we are seeing is mistrust growing between the corporates and the host communities because of lack of that response. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis absolument d'accord avec ce qu'il a dit sur le capitalisme. Parfois, ça exploite les peuples, mais pas au profit de la société. J'ai maintenant une autre question pour Monsieur le maire parce qu'il doit partir bientôt. C'est sur la coordination internationale. Parce que Mme Pangestu a parlé de l'importance de la coordination internationale. Et on a les élections présidentielles américaines. Et il semble que même si le résultat est contesté par M. Trump, c'est Joe Biden qui a été élu. À votre avis, avec cette élection, la coordination internationale et par conséquent la réforme du capitalisme va avancer et est-ce que, à votre avis, on va voir l'amélioration à ce sujet?
I think that we will see what will be the first decisions of the US administration. But my deep conviction is that the European countries should really count on themselves. We have been able, over the last month, during the crisis, to build a new path for the European construction. We have been able to accelerate important decisions on the field of industry, on the field of the fight against climate change, on the field of the fight against inequalities, social and economic inequalities, by building national and European recovery plans. I really think that we should build on these recovery plans to show the kind of world that we want to build and the kind of capitalism that we want to build. I mean, as I just said, the capitalism that would be able to fight against inequalities and to fight against climate change. Then we will see what the positions of the US will be. But we should not determine the way we want to move forward depending on the decisions of the US administration. We should first of all assume the economic and political position of the European continent on climate change, on the fight against inequalities, on the new technologies, on 5G, on artificial intelligence, and then entering into a new cooperation with the new US administration. Let's take an example that I just underlined, which is the necessity of having a more and a fairer and more efficient international taxation system. I think that we should build on the decisions already taken by some of the EU member states, I mean France, that have already introduced a digital taxation, then work on the European model and the European proposal that could be a leverage to accelerate the negotiation at the OECD level, and then ask the US what they want to do. Do they want to be part of a new international taxation system? Do they want to accelerate the process so that we can reach a consensus and a compromise at the OECD level or not? But you know, the starting point should be the European positions on the fight against inequalities, the fight against climate change, before entering into a discussion with the US administration. I really hope that this new US administration will have a new way of thinking about the cooperation with the EU countries. I really hope that the mood will be different. I really hope that the positions of the US administration will be different on many topics, but really, to tell you my deepest conviction, we have to count on ourselves. We must not be dependent on the positions taken by the US administration and by the United States. We must defend our own positions, our own interests, our own views, and then in a second time enter into discussion and with a new cooperation with this new US administration. And thank you to all of you for this meeting.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Et Madame Pangestu, je veux poser une autre question qui est liée à la réponse de Monsieur le maire. Donc, il y avait toujours la rivalité politique entre chaque pays, dans chaque organisation internationale. C'est le cas dans l'OMC, c'est le cas dans l'OMS. À votre avis, cette rivalité politique va continuer malgré la nécessité de réformer le capitalisme et le fonctionnement de l'organisation internationale. Et que proposez-vous pour résoudre ce problème?
Well, I think the situation is a dynamic one, let's say. And I think despite some of these, what would you call it, tensions that you were mentioning, actually on the ground, everybody is cooperating because I think the magnitude of the issues that we are facing on the ground as well as globally is huge. So you can take the example of the WHO because of the issues that you mentioned. But in fact, we at the World Bank, we are cooperating very much with all the international organizations, including WHO and the UN organizations, for instance, in the delivery of the emergency health services. And right now on vaccines, which is the next, the big issue coming up, because without vaccines, we cannot see, I guess, the alteration of the course of the pandemic and therefore the recovery processes in countries. So take, for instance, vaccines, which has also been subject to, what would you call it, nationalism, as well as, how do we have fair and equitable access to vaccines by the poorest countries? That is something that the World Bank is focusing on. So we have already announced a $12 billion financing for the poorest countries to access vaccines. And we are working with the WHO and UNICEF on the ground to ensure that it can be delivered on the ground. One thing is to access the vaccines. The other aspect is how do you have countries be prepared to deliver the vaccines on the ground, the infrastructure, the health workers, the communications that you need to do. And so we are, there is a international cooperation under Gavi, which is also one of these health collaboration to make sure that there is enough access from the manufacturers to the poorest countries. So we are supporting that too. And then how to finance it, and then how to deliver it on the ground. So that's just an example of, I think despite what you said, we do things and we cooperate where we can. I would say the way around many of these things is collaboration and cooperation around shared purposes. You don't have to think about it in kind of the more bigger picture, but let's look at where we can cooperate, find the areas where we can cooperate, and then just work, right? For the time being, the urgency of the issues that we have on the ground are just so huge. And the other aspects that we see, say you mentioned trade, I think on trade, what we have seen happening is, again, the urgency of the moment. That when we saw export restrictions affecting food supply at the beginning of the crisis, as countries naturally have the instinct, I want to have enough food, I want to have enough medicine for my own country, they start putting restrictions. And that hurts the poorest countries. If you see prices rises and not being able to access food or medicines, that hurts the poorest countries. A lot of them are in Africa. So this is something that at the beginning of the crisis, a lot of effort was put through all the international forum to pass on the message. Let's not repeat the food crisis of the 2008, when the food prices went up by 100% and 100 million people were impoverished because of food insecurity. Let's not repeat that. So fortunately, a lot of the export restrictions were lifted or were moderated. So I think this is, again, another example of where when push comes to shove, then things around international cooperation happens. But going forward, of course, what we would want to have is strengthening the multilateral and international cooperation, because as many of the previous speakers have mentioned, I think what we are facing in terms of having to build back a greener and fairer world, I agree totally with Muhammad Yunus that we don't want to go back to the post-pandemic world. What we want to be doing is rebuilding back a world that is going to be greener and fairer. And I think inequality is a big, big problem apart from the climate change problem. And within that inequality issue, we need to get many things right in terms of institutions, in terms of addressing those that are going to, one thing that is really, really worrying for us as we watch the pandemic roll out in many countries is that inequality was already bad before the pandemic. It's going to worsen if we don't take the steps, because it is affecting poorer households more. It's affecting women more. It's affecting youth more. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on and make sure that our policy and our responses, not just government policy, but at the community level, we can really change things and transform things. Use, a lot of talk about, let's use the crisis as an opportunity to change, to transform. And as you are rolling out the relief programs, you are also restructuring for a more resilient and more inclusive community and society. And that's not just the job of governments, it's also the job of communities. And I think one of the themes of this Paris Peace Forum is all about how it's not just governments, it's the whole of society, right? All the stakeholders have to come together. And in that respect, I guess it's not just about international cooperation between multilateral institutions in that sense, but also cooperation across the border with all stakeholders. I'll stop there.
Merci Madame Panguessu pour cette perspective très intéressante, importante. La prochaine question s'adresse à M. Mwangi. Vous avez parlé de l'égoïsme, du capitalisme. Et pouvez-vous proposer où on peut commencer pour réformer le capitalisme? Ça sera les acteurs d'entreprise ou ça sera plutôt chaque pays, chaque gouvernement? Qui jouera le rôle le plus important, à votre avis?
Thank you very much for that question. The world is very globalized, and I strongly believe, like Maria said, we have to do it together. I think given that capitalism has taken ground, has been with us for nearly 300 years, it's widely spread, it's interlinked globally through global supply chains, through capital allocation. I think it will be important we take it as a global issue and we use institutional frameworks that exist. I see the UN with its persuasive power, the Bretton Woods institutions with their gravitas into society, and that then plays down to our national governments. And the national governments that really take position. Then we involve the private sector. The private sector then as the owners and drivers of capitalism through enterprises then play their rightful role. But the reform of capitalism needs to start with allocation of opportunities. And while I'm not a great advocate for regulation, I think we are in a situation where the market forces have failed. And we have no choice but then to bring in frameworks that create a world that is more inclusive, a world that is more equal, a world that focuses on sustainability of the environment, a world that focuses on gender inclusion, and a world that looks at global systems that are fair, they are just, and leads to outcomes that we are looking for. Unless we restructure the systems that have led us here, capitalism on its own, as it stands, will not solve the solution. So we need to be encompassing. We need to bring everybody on the table. We need to listen together because we are all affected. On the earlier question, when you look, one of the most devastating effects is climate change in Africa. We're seeing the Sahara Desert really expanding aggressively, taking arable land. And when you look at, well, Africa is as guilty as the rest of the world, the contribution to that guilt is not that significant. But the suffering and impact of climate change on Africa is disproportionately bigger than the contribution. And the question is, when then you create responsibility, the issue of holding people to responsibility, we need a more fairer system, a more effective system. So it can't be done by the corporate world alone, but the corporate world, the capitalism economy must embrace the principles of inclusion. They must embrace the issue of integration with communities. It must embrace the question of opportunity allocation, and it must embrace purpose. If capitalism was driven by purpose, then it could make equality a primary purpose. If capitalism was driven by sustainability and a green and sustainable environment, then it could be driven by that purpose, and it can deliver. The way it has delivered wealth, it can deliver solutions if it is purpose-driven. I think the centricity of profit must be addressed as a real big concern, but I think we can do much better if capitalism was to address purpose on a larger scale at the society's level. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup pour votre réponse très intéressante. Maintenant, je vais passer à la partie de questions et réponses. J'ai reçu beaucoup de questions de spectateurs. Cette question, c'est peut-être pour M. Yunus. Donc, la question, c'est il y a des peuples qui ne connaissent pas l'inclusion ou le nouveau capitalisme. Pouvez-vous expliquer avec les mots simples qu'est-ce que c'est le nouveau capitalisme, M. Yunus?
I didn't say neo-capitalism. I didn't utter that word. I said the capitalism is wrong, take us to the wrong destination. And the pandemic brought us the report card, what the capitalism achieved. And that's what we have been discussing. That's a destruction, and also saying that it turns us into, as human beings, we became the most endangered species on this planet because of the capitalism and the wealth concentration and the artificial intelligence, massive unemployment. So report card is very bad. So whatever we need to do is the reverse of capitalism. If capitalism has done this, we have to put it in a reverse gear to make the other thing. That's why I was talking about the 3 zeros, zero net carbon emission. That's what the goal would be. Instead of global warming, we go to the net zero carbon emission. Instead of global wealth concentration, we go for zero wealth concentration. And instead of massive unemployment, we go for zero unemployment. These are the 3 zeros we talk about. What kind of mechanism it would be? Definitely we learn from the failures of capitalism, that they led us to all these problems. And that's what we do. And capitalism emphasized the role of the government very much. I don't think government should be the important player in this game. Individual human being is the player in this game, because we decide what we want to do. And if I want to do a business not to make money, but to serve people, it's my decision. The government cannot beat me in my head to do that. If I create a corporate body to create a social business to address the problem of something, and the water problem or a housing problem or health problem, that's us as individuals, we do that. It's not the government decisions. So it's a transformation of individual is the key to the whole transformation of the capitalism that we are talking about. And look at the vaccine. We are talking about the vaccine, corona vaccine. The vaccine is out, now they're saying, and we see how nakedly is a competition to make money instead of saving people. Saving people is just a kind of an excuse for them to get more and more money. So this is the direction that all those vaccines are being bought up by the big countries and so on. They couldn't care less whether this would be available for poor countries or not. These are the kind of outcome of the greed-driven environment that we have created. And we said, if we had to do this different kind of economy, we'd be creating social businesses, social business pharmaceutical company, a pharmaceutical company which is designed to solve people's problem, not to make money for themselves by producing a medicine at an affordable price so that you don't have to grab money from everybody so that you can make lots of money and your stock price goes up. That's the wrong direction. It's not the government decision that you stop the pharmaceutical company. It's my decision. It's your decision. If I want to create a social business pharmaceutical company, I don't think anybody can stop me. I'm doing business. I'm not violating any rule, any law. But my purpose is to serve people. And that's what the education process becomes very important. What we tell the young people who are marching on the street today, all the teenagers calling themselves Fridays for Future, telling that, addressing their parents that you have been totally irresponsible. You created a world which is destructive for us. You have stolen our future. Our children accusing us that we have stolen their future. How ugly can it get? We should be ready, instead of giving a dangerous world to our children, we should be ready to give them a safe, beautiful world to them. We are not doing that. I said, our house is burning. That's what global warming part is all about. But we are having a big party inside. We are saying, oh my God, our economy is booming. We are doing this, we are doing that. Our GDP growth is fantastic. Our stock market price is going up. But the house is burning. We couldn't care less. We are so addicted. We're so addicted to the money and the profit that we forget everything else. We forget that we have to live on this planet. We have to hand over this planet to our children. We don't even care for our children. There's our children telling us on the street every Friday. So when do we wake up and see our house is burning? We have to stop that. So this is the issue. It's not an issue of the government decisions and what the collaboration between the government is. These are subsidiary issues. Central issues are what we are as a human being. What is it that we want to do? And when I said about the social business pharmaceutical company to produce vaccines, to make it available to every single people in a price that you only cover the cost, you don't have any intention of making money, people get very surprised. How can it be possible? And when I say vaccine should be made a global public good, common good, meaning that vaccine should not have any patent right. And I made a global appeal sent around the whole world. Many important people signed up, many unimportant people signed up, so that it has lots of supporters to declare vaccine as a patent-free public good, common good. And still it's going around. We are going to United Nations to lobby with them to declare vaccine as a public good. And it's nothing new. What we are saying is nothing new, because polio vaccine is a common good. Polio vaccine was declared as a people's vaccine when the producer, the inventor of it, he declared that I don't want to own the patent of it. It's free, anybody can produce it. That should be the corona vaccine should be, so that we can produce it everywhere. We don't have to tie down to the half a dozen companies who want to make all the money for themselves. That's not the direction that we want to go. So it's a change of our own thing. Capitalism is not in the book. Capitalism in me, in you. And we have to do that. And we can change the world the way we want to do that. It's our decision. Human beings can do anything they want. If you make up our mind, we can do it. Nothing is impossible for human being. So if you want to create a world of 3-0, zero net carbon emission and zero wealth concentration and zero unemployment, it's our decision. We can make it because we know how to make it happen. Why the world is like this? We know exactly why this global warming is happening. It's nothing secret. It's a very open thing. It's written everywhere. All the information is there. Who is contributing to this global warming? We know exactly who is contributing how much, but we don't say a word. And we go and participate, we go and support, we make it, okay, they're tax-paying companies, what can you do? That's not it. You cannot destroy just because you pay taxes. So we have to get what the idea of a business is all about, what the purpose of the economy is all about. And that's the challenge that we have right now. We don't want to go back. Going back is an option, is not an option. So we have to make that decision very boldly right now. No going back. And unless we make the decision right now, we end up in the same old game. and rush to the end game where our last station is coming when the game will be over. We don't want to make that game is over. We want to make this planet livable, beautiful, and a peaceful world. That's the kind of world that we want to build. It's a question of making a personal decision, all of us. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis sûr que les personnes qui ne connaissaient pas son idée comprennent mieux maintenant. Alors là, on a juste un peu moins de 5 minutes avant la fin de cette séance. Donc, brièvement, M. Mouangi et Mme Pangestur, une question de notre lecteur. Comment on peut tenir compte de la diversité, grande diversité de chaque pays? Je pense que ça veut dire qu'il y a des pays riches, il y a des pays moins riches, il y a des pays de démocratie, il y a des pays non-démocratie. Et comment on peut tenir compte de la diversité quand on établir l'économie plus égalitaire, plus verte? D'abord, peut-être Mme Pangestur.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We need to really understand the particular country situation to understand, where would be the major points or the major push points that would actually lead to the transformation to a greener and fairer society. And in some cases, in countries where, for instance, governments or institutions are not functioning or not functioning well, then a lot actually falls on the communities and the civil society to do a lot of the heavy lifting, including fighting for advocating for institutional changes. Whereas in countries where this is more well functioning, how do you design policies better to make sure that you get people at the center of the transformation, or that we also have green? I would say, as I mentioned earlier, it should be that people and sustainable development needs to be at the heart of any transformation processes that we do, whether it's policy or whether it's changing institutions and changing the way things work. So I think it's very very difficult, and it's always a question of where do you start and who should be the one starting it. And I think this is really part of what I understand is the mission or the vision of the Paris Peace Forum. I've heard Pascal Lamy say it. He talks about plurilateral governance, so that it can't just be the government. It has to be a kind of all the stakeholders in the society, including private sector, including CSO, including citizens, including communities. So I think taking into account the diversity of every country's situation is hugely important, but that we should always probably look at the glass half full. We have to look for opportunities where change can happen, and then try to build the coalition around that purpose to start making things happen. And it will be very much dependent on the country. And so I think the World Bank, we typically do work through governments, but we also can help communities to undertake transformation where we see it needs to happen. But again, this needs to happen, I think, collectively, not just governments, not just international institutions, but it has to be kind of what I call the whole of society approach.
I think jumping into the conversation, the most important thing is to accept that this is a humanity issue. It's a societal issue. All of us are affected. And we then appreciate the diversity that countries experience, the diversity in level of development and engagement and everything in between. But I think to solve the problem then is to accept if it affects all of us, is a human issue, then we need only to agree on the outcomes. And one of the outcomes is like build afresh, build better, a better world, and build it with the objective of solving the challenges that are before us. And then we can give flexibility on the how. The flexibility that will accommodate diversity should be on the how, but we together agree on the outcomes, such that the objective and the outcomes are standard, but how each country approaches and executes to achieve objective is flexible so that it accommodates the diversity that we have in the world. But I strongly advocate that all of us then get committed to building better the world that we all wish to have. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, M. Mwangi. Donc, c'est la fin de cette séance. Merci pour vos perspectives, visions très intéressantes sur ce sujet. On a bien partagé les problèmes, les défis et les problèmes de cette question. Bon. Merci beaucoup, Madame Pangesture, Monsieur Nus, Monsieur Mwangi, et merci à tous les spectateurs qui ont participé à cette séance. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.